On to the SLTV StarSeries Hearthstone Season 1. We're going onwards with Firebat and Lothar. They're going to be facing off against each other. We just saw Skaka get blown out by Kucha. He almost got the reverse sweep, but it wasn't quite there. That last match ended up way faster than I thought it would. What do you have as expectations from the two players coming up?
Yeah, I expect a really good match between these two very, very good players. And I know you're excited about getting to see Lothar actually in the player seat, getting to play a little bit because, he's been doing more of the managerial duties lately. And then, what else could we say about Firebat? He's the world champion and considered the best player in the world still.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we were talking about the relationship Archon has with some of the newer decks, I guess, and maybe their unwillingness to just go out there and play some of the newer ones. I don't know if that explains the choices Firebat made as far as his picks go. I mean, Firebat brought Druid, Rogue, Warrior, and they're probably going to err on the side of caution or standard as opposed to bringing Paladin. Now, does that mean that Firebat doesn't think Secret Paladin is good? That's one thing, or does he just think it's not appropriate for the current best of five metagame? That's another thing. Maybe it's good enough, but not worth bringing. And on the other hand, you have Lothar with just subbing out the rogue for the paladin, both with druid and warrior.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to, speak for him, but I don't think he's the biggest fan of the Secret Paladin deck. He seems to value consistency in Hearthstone a lot more than anything else, and just always having very similar draws or having decks that have a lot of play to them. Where he gets to make as many decisions as possible, and that's why you see him play decks like Rogue. Something here. We don't know which Warrior deck he's playing, but if I had to make a bet on it, I would just say it's going to be Grim Patron. I mean, he does live with Zalae, one of the better Grim
Right.
Patron players in the world, and he gets to see that deck all the time. Even if he's not playing it, he gets to see Zalae play it and hear Zalae play it, so he gets a lot of practice in with that. And then Druid, I just expect the typical Druid decks that we've seen so far. What do you think we're going to see out of Lothar here? I think we're seeing Secret Paladin for sure.
I would be surprised if we didn't see it. Grim Patron also makes a lot of sense just based on the fact that, Life Coach is playing all of that stuff. I like Lothar's decision to bring Druid, though. I mean, everybody kind of brings it in the best of five. I think there's no reason not to, just considering how consistent it's become. Kucha didn't bring it and picked up the Hunter, but I wonder in a different universe, if we replay that match most of the time, if maybe things go differently, depending on how, like, I don't know how good mid-range Hunter with Beast is against Druid, because the advent of the Beast variant actually came up as a result of having to deal with some more aggressive decks as opposed to having to deal with mid-range ones. So Druid seems to be ubiquitous, like across the board. Everybody's picking it, and I don't expect anything too different. Although I wouldn't be surprised if Lothar decided to, spin it. He does that very often.
Yeah, do you think the ubiquitous choice of Druid is because of the fact that it's just like safe and consistent, and it's just such a good deck to have in tournaments because it counters some decks very well. Like it does pretty well against Warrior and Handlock and those kind of decks, and it does have some bad matchups, but you're not seeing Hunter as much here. You're not seeing Zoo as much, and then it can still compete even when it gets some really good draws.
Yeah, I mean, it's that deck that just does well across the board no matter what metagame is kind of shoved in, I guess. It's one of those things. You just need the ramp, no matter which kind of matchup you're getting into, you're usually going to be fine. Lothar with his Paladin to start off, and Firebat with the Rogue. So it's looking like Lothar is, in fact, a big fan of the Secret Paladin deck.
Yeah, how do you think this matchup feels to you? I haven't seen it play out too much, but cards like Fan of Knives
I
and
like Rogue a lot.
yeah,
I think Rogue has like a crazy matchup. Just because something bad happens, you have saps.
mhm.
And there's very few targets in that deck to sap, right? Unless Lothar is bringing the, well, I was going to say the
Oh,
more
wow.
mid-range variant, maybe then that could be a problem, because then you don't have enough saps to deal with the Mysterious Challenger and the mid-range minions. Okay, well, it turns out Lothar has brought something of a mid-range.
Yeah, I mean, this is a weird build of it because it's got Secret Keepers as well. I mean, he's got the super early draw and this like a good late draw, and a good curve could be Mysterious Challenger on 6 into Doctor Boom on 7. That'll be pretty hard to deal with if the Rogue deck isn't already way out ahead.
Yeah, well, it looks like Lothar's first Secret Keeper is going to die unless they pick up another secret, and that's a pretty rough start for Lothar. Usually, you expect to be able to protect that Secret Keeper through either a secret, or in this case, he was hoping to get one of his probably 7 to 9, where he just drops a second Secret Keeper to go with it.
Yeah, and you gotta believe if he makes room for all these cards like Pilot Shredders and Doctor Booms and stuff, you gotta believe he's maybe on the lower end of secrets, not the full 9 that we've seen from some other decks, but it's still possible.
Yeah, I was talking with RDU a little bit when we were casting ATLC, and we were talking about Secret Paladin. The first, 6 brought it one day, and it just did miserably, right? And Team
Mm.
Archon, a lot of people were saying, all over the Hearthstone community, oh, the reason they lost is because 6 brought a crappy deck. Secret Paladin is garbage. What was he thinking? And then next thing you know, it's actually one of the better decks that came out TGT. And RDU and I were discussing this on stream, and he was asking me, do you think Secret Paladin is a good deck? And I was like, yeah, I mean, I think it's probably, tier 1.5, tier 2 at the moment. And he's like, I think when the deck lists get refined, it's going to become tier 1 patron level. So
Oh
already
wow.
there, yeah, Nihilum apparently had a good feeling for how the deck would perform, and Lothar might have just brought one of those possibly theory crafted decks from Nihilum, which is more on the mid-range side.
Yeah, and a lot of the other good decks that everyone's playing in these tournaments, they're already pretty refined. I mean, you might change one card here or there, maybe two. There's not big changes going on, so you have time to sit around, with your friends and your teammates to play this deck over and over again and figure out what the right way to do it is. And like they can figure out the right builds and stuff. They have time for it because they're not having to worry about a completely new metagame because the other cards, they aren't taking hold like you'd think they would have. You haven't
Right.
seen a ton of TGT, so maybe this is the version they found that is actually just the best.
Yeah, because it's using the mix of already amazing cards and just sprinkling it some of the newer, cards that work well in Paladin. Now, I really love the Snap Deadly Poison on Firebat's one durability dagger. A lot of people might think this through, like, hey, do I dagger? Do I use Deadly Poison with one durability? And sometimes people will hesitate and maybe play it a bit slower, but Firebat just values the board control against the Secret Value deck more than anything else. And I think that's definitely the right call.
Yeah, I 100% agree with it here. You need to get board control before turn 6, where you think Doctor 6, as they're referring to it now, is going to happen. And we've talked about how dangerous Rogue can be if they have a minion sit around for even just a turn. I mean, it's so dangerous to let them have any kind of board control. Plus, I mean, he's just trying to get as good of a spot as he can to fight from. He needs to have turns where if he has to use a 7-mana sprint, he's not just going to die because of that. He has time to recover afterwards.
Yeah, so Firebat here is just going to ignore the Paladin Shredder. He tested for Noble Sack. He knows it's not it. And he doesn't want to risk anything like, running into a redemption by attacking into the Shredder. Playing the Azure Drake also lets him check for Repentance. So now he's got a great idea of what this is. And it can pretty much only be Avenge or Redemption. And why would you play Paladin Shredder with an Avenge? So again, taking the next step and narrowing it down to the Redemption.
Yeah, and this is a pretty good top deck for Lothar here if he wants to. There's not many better top decks in all of the Paladin realm. If you're going to draw something on turn 6, might as well be Mysterious Challenger.
Yeah, thin that deck. Might as well do it now.
Yeah, it's possible he may have cut some of the secrets from this deck as well to make room for all this mid range stuff. We see only 3 more come out. He already had 1 set up, so.
All right, so in a position like this, what do? You know that if you dagger up an attack, you trigger Noble Sack, you trigger Redemption, and you trigger Avenge. So that's going to be 3 things that are going to be problematic. So you will have to deal with a 2/1 that comes back to life and a huge minion. Without Sap, can you really afford that?
Yeah, he does have a Blade Fury, so I think he's trying to find something to couple with that to kind of clean up this board. And it turns out, or be able to push through enough damage, like something like Tinker Sharpsword Oil, because, like you said, he doesn't have anything to deal with a giant, 9/7 or 9/8 right now that's possible going to come out this turn. And
Here we go. Let's
yeah, I
see
was
what
gonna
the
say,
secrets do. So Noble Sacrifice triggers, and then we'll probably get either Redemption or Revenge, depending on the order. I think they're all simultaneous, so Revenge triggers first. And then Redemption and Competitive Spirit. Like, RDU was talking about Repentance, or I think Competitive Spirit, he was saying, was not a mandatory card. Like, you could cut the second copy of Competitive Spirit and maybe
yeah,
just run the one.
it seems like the weakest one to me. I mean, you're getting 1 or 2 minions buffed by +1/+1, and is that enough to warrant multiple slots in your deck of cards that you want to draw? Because like sometimes you draw Secret Keeper, and the only secret you have is Competitive Spirit, and it does give your guy +2/+2 effectively, which is pretty good. It's Undertaker level almost at the beginning of a game, but is that what you want to be doing in your deck? And we even see a Blessing of Kings here. This has got a lot of tools in it that we haven't seen from some of the other ones.
So shifting the aggression away from the paladin and looking at the rogue, Firebat, even though he's not, he doesn't have lethal, he doesn't have a crazy Tinker's turn with preps. Lothar is worried, right? He has to make trades just because of the possibility that Firebat is sitting on a crazy amount of burst. All it takes is a dagger up, South Sea deckhand, prep Tinkers, and a blade flurry, and he's out of it. That would just be game, and it's a fairly common hand that you have to expect at a stage of the game like this one. So Lothar probably is going to play slowly and trade, which gives Firebat the opportunity to clean up the board afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he cleared off all of Firebat's board here. But yeah, pushing 7 and trying to force lethal over the next turn is also a really good play from Lothar
I
because
like that.
it's so dangerous. Leaving around 1 minion, he probably feels safe enough, but leaving 10 power on the board, that's way too dangerous to do against a rogue player.
All right, so the Avenge is up and ready to run. Basically, whatever ends up living after one of the minions dies. I mean, how do you deal with this if you're Firebat? Because you're going to buff something with that Avenge, which is, a bit of a problem. You kind of have to heal bot, but if you do that, do you backstab Fan of Knives?
Yeah, I mean, this is a really rough spot for Firebat. If he backstabs and Fan of Knives, he can take care of a couple minions here. I mean, 1 minion, but he's
You might be
in
able
such
to kill the 6-2, but the
yeah.
7-7 being buffed would be an issue.
Yeah, that's the problem he's having here is he actually, drawing both these sprints in the spot and no preps, he doesn't have a lot of power to get through his deck. That's the problem. And he's going to take too much damage here. I mean, I don't know if he can get out of this without having another sap.
Avenge absolutely has to trigger on the 8-1 right now. Well, that's a lot of damage. He can still trade and then heal bot. He's going to be on 10 health. He's not out of it. There's a good chance that he ends up picking up something to save himself after he, preps Prince into a sap. We've talked about this, but this is one of the most important cards against Secret Pally. Sap just negates that huge burst they're trying to put together.
Yeah, and Sap pretty good against Mysterious Challenger. The second time they play the card, they're not going to get they're not going to get the full value. They're not going to get all of the secrets all over again. You've already triggered through all of them. So Firebat's putting himself in a spot here where if he can recover this board, there's a chance he wins, but I don't think he's going to be expecting the Doctor Boom out of Lothar here.
I don't know. When you've seen the Shredder, I think you might expect Doctor Boom and Tyrion. I've seen lists of this type of deck that actually, curve really high, and that's kind of the problem, I guess, with it. It reminds me a bit of the Warlock situation where they have an archetype, say Handlock, and for a while Handlock was Demon Lock. It was, just pure giants. It was sometimes just a mid-range Warlock that sprinkled in giants, and you just never knew what to expect. So that's the big warning, sign against I guess a Paladin, Secret Pally, when you see that Paladin Shredder, they might be trying to curve up much higher than you usually would expect them.
Yeah, I saw a Tyrion out of this deck yesterday playing on ladder, and I was quite surprised. I hadn't actually seen that deck start to take hold yet, and it seems like everyone is coming to the consensus that you should have a higher curve in these decks.
Yeah, and I think it makes a lot of sense. I don't really know how you're supposed to contest some of the more mid-rangey decks without having something like this.
Yeah, and Firebat does not pick up a sap here. He's going to take a ton of damage off these boombots, and he's going to eviscerate himself here. He's going to get a little blowback here and make sure that he goes out in style.
Is that Harakiri, right? Is that how you call that?
I
think,
think,
you
yeah,
eviscerate yourself. That would have to be the proper term. The proper term. So Lothar is going to take the game with a Secret Paladin, again showing the strength of this new archetype. Wow, it's been a while since I've seen Lothar's face on a competitive little tableau there. So we have Firebat with his 3 decks. He's going to have to go up against a Patron, probably from Lothar, and the Druid. Both can be very difficult. Rogue, some people say, has the edge over Patron, but again, it depends on the player you ask that, right?
Yeah, we talked about this. It seems like rogue players, they feel like they're always favored in their matchups. And then if you ask the other player, they're like, no, I think it's pretty good. But rogue players say at the worst, oh, it's 50-50 in every match. They always, and that's such prototypical rogue players. They always feel like, yeah, I mean, I have a chance to win every game. I draw so many cards. I do so many cool, powerful things that I'm going to be able to win. And in Firebat's hand, you got to believe he's at least 50-50 versus everything, right?
Yeah, I'd imagine. I mean, there's a few players that actually I would pin as at least 50-50 across the board. Was it Oskaka who was considered for a while, at least a while back? Yeah, he had the highest win rate on ladder with Rogue. If I remember correctly, there was a time where he was playing Rogue, and Blizzard released that specific data, and Oskaka was the best player with the highest win rate at the very least.
Oh wow, that's pretty surprising. When I think of the amazing rogue players, he isn't the first person that comes to mind for me, but he is up there. I think of players like like Super JJ, Purple, and some of these guys, and like even Firebat. I didn't know that Osaka was that high, but it doesn't really surprise
It's
me.
been a while. Let's just say that that data, of course, goes back a long time. So of course, I think we've seen other players pick up Rogue, and they play it probably like a lot more than Skaka as far as their tournament representation. So maybe that's why we associate them with that more frequently.
Yeah, and you got to believe a lot of it might have been Miracle with him as well, and he seems like the perfect person to be playing a deck like Miracle Rogue.
Yeah, knows when to go all in, when knows when to hold back.
Yeah, he's that seems like the perfect deck for him. I bet you he was kind of sad that deck got pretty nerfed.
So Lothar with the Savage Combatant, the deck I was talking to you about earlier, you know, the Ramp Druid, there's a possibility this is something like it. Just because Savage Combatant I haven't seen much of in combo decks, and I've seen a lot more of it in, you know, as a one-of in a Ramp deck. Sometimes they'll cut a single Shredder for it. Pretty
You know,
sweet.
I agree that we haven't seen much of this, and I hope it's that kind of build. Like maybe combo lists, way more ramp and big top end and crazy stuff like that. But this is something that's actually happening a little bit too in some of the Druid lists. You're seeing just the extra 4-drop get put into the deck. We've even seen Yeti come back into the metagame a little bit,
Right.
just because with an extra two mana ramp spells, you just want to make sure that you hit that 4-drop every time.
I mean, it's so easy to run the 4-drop just because Darnassus Aspirant enables everything. This top deck from Lothar is going to be so sweet. Now, Firebat can wait, right? Like, there's no hurry to kill the Shade immediately. You'd love to Flurry, but there's really no need to do it right away. So you can take your time a little longer. You've got one more turn, and the Flurry will still kill the Shade. So take your time.
Yeah, you might be able to catch something else in it. Like Lothar might play an Azure Drake here, and you can use your Flurry to put 3 damage on it. And if you want to, you can even trade in your Earth and Ring Farseer. I don't know if he's in that kind of position where he needs to be doing that kind of play yet. But yeah, I mean, just give your opponent the chance to play into this just a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I do you think he'll trade here though? Because Blade Through would be really devastating. Oh, he doesn't trade the Shade.
The
Just
Blood Mage
hold on to
Thalanos
it.
would be amazing here, but
You can just like SI it down. It's
right.
fine. It might actually be better even, right?
Yeah, it gets the 3/3 body into play. I was thinking of like, other amazing top decks you could have here as well. Just maybe save the SI agent as like a little bit more burst.
All right, so never mind. The dream is dead. It is in fact a combo druid. When, oh when, players, will you show me a deck that I have not seen before? I guess Secret Paladin has to, fill up that urge for a little while at least. So Firebat in a pretty good position. He's got the sap to answer threats, but Lothar has the combo. If he's able to stabilize on the board, he should be able to get away with this, and he can wipe the board completely clean here.
Yeah, that's one thing that, Druid has a problem with. When you go wide on them, they can't always take care of everything, but this hand is actually going to be able to do it for him here, and he's going to be able to push, a little bit of damage over the next turn or two as well. Firebat in trouble here because he's already got combo in his hand. He also has double Savage Roar, which he might even need Force of Nature to get it done. Double Savage Roar might get it done as well over the next couple turns. Firebat's going to have to, step gingerly, but he does have Sap. It's one of the best cards in this matchup for Rogue against Druid.
Do you expect a sap or like Blood Mage? I guess you could cycle, but I think setting up the dagger for Tinkers wouldn't be a terrible play either, depending on what you really think you're gonna need. The thing is, from here on out, you expect your health to be 14.
Yeah.
Minus whatever else is on the board, added Savage Roar to it. So you're always dead if your health total includes the combo gone, basically, which is always a big problem when you're playing against Druid because you end up in the late game cleaning up the board inefficiently just to get stuff out.
Yeah, we were talking about that, not only is combo good, obviously 9 mana for 14 damage is amazing, but the threat of it is so amazing. It makes players play weird. They have to clear in spots where they want to be pushing for damage because they have to play around you, 14ing you out of nowhere. And you're going to see Firebat take a little bit of risk here, set up his dagger, not use sap just yet, maybe holding onto it for a big taunt in the turn where he wants to try to push for lethal.
Yeah, and based on what Lothar said, like, you could push here for 25 damage if you wanted, but the drawback is, what if you don't get it done? So maybe you use one of the Treants, to kill the Drake, and you push everything else to phase. And that's going to let you win the game most of the time, is my guess.
Yeah, I mean, you may see him push all the damage because of the swipe here, and he has, hero powers and another Savage Roar. And so I like just, pushing as much damage as possible and trading off for Azure Drake as well, just to kind of, it plays it a little safe, you still
Well, I
have
mean,
Savage
imagine if Firebat's hand is like prep, Tinkers, Eviscerate. You haven't seen any of those yet. I would be very scared of all those cards.
And he's going to actually push for a ton of damage here this turn.
Yeah, but he's gonna be dead anyway because
Yep.
Swipe Savage Roar will clean it up, and Lothar is gonna be going up 2-0 against the 2014 world champion. If you present it that way, I guess it's just like super cool, right?
Yeah, I mean, he is the only world champion. He's the reigning world champion and the only one of Hearthstone so far. How do you like his chances to repeat this year, by the way?
Honestly, there's a lot. Like the scene has developed tremendously, right? Where a lot more blood has come into the scene, and it's really hard to start seeing the edges. I think they're even more minute now than they used to be. And I also want to emphasize that a lot of cards, are, like a lot of decks right now, include cards like Shredder. They include cards like Ram Wrangler, Tempo Mage with Unstable Portal, Spell Slinger. There's all this little RNG being added into the mix, which means the edges that certain players used to have may not be as prevalent in the format like this year's World Championship as they might have been last year. But there's a chance Firebat makes it through. It's just going to be a very rough road, littered with challenge, to be honest.
Yeah, and he's gonna go with Rogue again. Live by the sword, die by the sword here. And yeah, I like this
But
choice. Because you gotta assume it's gonna be Patron on the other side, and this is another hand from him that is not great looking to start the game.
yeah, and the thing is, he has to win 3 matches with 3 different decks against Patron. Like, color me surprised if he does it.
Yeah,
It'll be
even
pretty awesome, but
Yeah, even being the best player in the world, I mean, this is a very uphill task in front of him here. Beating three decks. He has to win to 3 different decks against Grim Patron. That's not exactly what you want to be doing. There's a reason why Grim Patron is labeled the best deck in the format. Man, Lothar's looked great so far here in this match. These have been 2 very quick games.
yeah. So what I like though is that if somebody reverse sweeps Patron, the point has been proven. So my
Yeah.
bets, my hopes at least, are currently on Firebat to just clean this up and prove to me that Patron can be overcome. It's
See,
gonna be a rough ride.
from a selfish reason, I want Patron to just easily steamroll here because I want the deck nerfed. I want the deck out of Hearthstone. So I just want to see it. I want to see
Right.
nothing but Patron mirrors in BlizzCon if it comes down to that. And it's still legal. Just so something is actually done about it. I just think it's bad for the game. It's oppressive for deck building, that kind of stuff.
I mean, I'll be honest with you. I love the deck. I still think it's one of the coolest decks out there because it's the one deck that isn't subject to as much RNG as other ones. The problem is maybe that it's maybe a tiny bit overtuned for the most part, but it's hard to draw the line between what's causing the problem. A lot of people have different opinions on that front. Like, I have no doubt that if TGT doesn't shake up the metagame, something will be done. So Blizzard is waiting the same way maybe they did wait with GVG. So we just have to wait a little longer. If the need really arises, then I have no doubt Blizzard will rise up to the challenge.
Yeah, and Firebat's going to try to get on the board here with a Violet Teacher. He's got an Azure Drake behind this as well, and he's got a couple pieces, and his hand is starting to pan together just a little bit. I mean, that opener was just not very good, but it doesn't matter too much here. I mean, his opener doesn't have to be amazing as long as he doesn't draw dead afterwards, because Lothar's never just going to go crazy and like super move all in early against Rogue because they have so many good tools to punish you. Like if you move in early on a Frothing Berserker, they have Sap. If you try to go crazy with Patron super early, they can easily Blade Flurry you out of the game and stuff like that. So like he's going to play probably a little bit more of a tempo-oriented strategy against them and try to take care of what's going on and then reevaluate from there. Like this turn's great. He gets to Whirlwind, pick up an extra card, gets to execute this Violet Teacher if he wants to because it's one of the biggest threats in
Well, I
Firebat's
think
deck.
actually you might be fine with it, sticking around just because you can clean it up. But now that you've used up the Whirlwind, it's a little a little bit more difficult. This was a really complex turn for Patron because they could play Death Spite, they could use the coin and quote unquote waste it. They could Whirlwind, just play the Ghoul. There's like a lot of lines of play that could be. I guess you could defend them. If you were to be asked, what would you have done here? You could defend just about any line of play that was made. And Lothar's just going for crazy card draw.
Yeah, I mean, I like the way he played the turn because you have Deathbite to answer Azure Drakes, and, Firebat's draw looks a little slow, so you have to believe that maybe something like Azure Drake is there, and it's a card that sometimes they even keep in their opening hand in this matchup. Plus, I mean, you didn't, like, need to develop the Deathbite, the turn earlier. It's not like, because he doesn't have patrons yet, so it's not a priority there. So I
Oh
like
my god, this is such a crazy
wow.
amount of burst coming from Firebat. There's no way he's not just pushing like next turn with a crazy double Tinker Southsea play.
Yeah, and he's got a prep here as well. I mean, he can make sure all kinds of things go crazy here the next turn. I mean, he's going to be able to push for so much damage.
Do you expect Lothar to taunt up behind the Ghoul? Or do you think he's still going to be playing it a bit slow? I wouldn't be surprised to see like one ghoul come out maybe just because.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
it's
mean,
just
it
so.
matters what he thinks he's going to be doing next turn. I think it really mattered if he were to, top deck a patron there. It's going to change his. I mean, does he have 10 cards in hand? Three, six.
Yeah, he's got 10.
Yeah,
He
he's got
does.
10 cards in hand. So, I mean, these are the games that are really hard for patron players. They have so many options and they're all so good. But if you mess up your sequencing on these cards and don't do it correctly, you can lose so much value over the next couple turns. Plus, I mean, you're playing against a rogue, which is one of the hardest decks to play against because they can do so many different things every turn. Like, what is Firebat capable of next turn?
I mean, he could be putting together between the preps, like the South Sea into Tinkers, into prep Tinkers. That's 9 damage on the weapon, plus another what 8 on the South Sea, and that doesn't even account for the Blade Flurry. So I think Firebat is well on his way to just, yeah. I mean, after this turn, I think this could just be it. Like Firebat is going to push for a huge amount of damage, and there's almost nothing that Lothar can do to stop it.
Yeah, he's gonna be able to push for a ton of damage to face this turn, and then
Right.
Blade Fury is gonna just be able to clean everything up next turn. Like Lothar can't even amass a board that could live through it and threaten lethal and stop him from doing anything here. I mean, yeah, as we said, that opening hand not amazing, but he kind of drew into what was going to be good here because he's not playing against a deck that's going to be pressuring him every single turn. From
Yep.
turn two.
So Firebat gonna push for 17 damage just casually. Lothar's eye is popping wide open like what's going on here? And unless he finds a way to armor up way more than he currently is, and there's a way he does that, right? Shield block and armor up, and like the two of them together are enough to save him. It keeps him out of, Blade Flurry Eviscerate range, but it's still not quite over. And that's the thing he's probably scared of right now.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Firebat does have Blade Fury plus Eviscerate to push a ton of damage this turn if he wants, but he could also just, if there's no taunter, I mean, if he just kills the South Sea deckhand here, then you could just attack and save the Blade Fury for later. But you gotta believe there's gonna be a taunter and an inner rage used this turn.
Well, you have to assume this dies to either slam, inner rage, or a second whirlwind would probably be used in a desperation case. So I think this South Sea was not supposed to see another day. We never thank those guys enough. They're like go out on the board, attack somebody in the face, and then die.
Yeah.
Or a little one drop.
It serves so many purposes. I mean, it gets through traps. It's a huge amount of burst damage. It could be a removal spell in the right spot. I mean, yeah, he's definitely the unsung hero of the deck. You're right.
Alright, so this here is a decent play from Lothar because it gives him 2 armor, right? If the Blade Fury ends up being used. Backstab, Fan of Knives. Does that ever do something? So if you Blade Fury first, you're guaranteed to get a huge amount of damage in, but how do you steal the game?
Well, he's just going to have to get into any other piece of damage here with the Fan of Knives, which you're going to see him just cycle this turn is just getting a card, because honestly, it's not even good against...
Oh my god, he's going to be able to push for another 3 damage. Yeah. What a nice top deck for Firebat. There's not a lot of one-cost cards that actually give him the opportunity to deal damage.
Yeah, and it's good that he gets to do it this turn, too, because it gets to play around taunt, since he gets to kill it this turn. He doesn't have to worry about a future taunt blocking, the 3 power from the stagger.
Well, if I'm Lothar, I'm probably considering that unstable ghoul number 2.
Yeah, and he actually needs to start getting something going here as soon as well. I mean, if he doesn't start pressuring Firebat, Firebat just has all the time in the world to find, just any minions to help finish off this game as well. I mean, Lothar can gain a lot of life and push for a little damage here, but he's not putting a lot of pressure on Firebat as well, so he needs to not only prevent himself from dying, but start to find ways to win.
Yeah, I mean, armoring up, playing Death's Bite, I would have almost preferred, armor up, Death's Bite, and then play the Ghoul. And then next turn, you trigger the Death's Bite, by attacking, and then next turn you can go for Frothding, Warsong, Whirlwind play. That might have been enough to finish off the Rogue, I think, for the most part.
Yeah.
But we'll see what he ends up doing.
Yeah, I like that line a lot, actually, if you can get Death's Bite to go off next turn.
Yeah. So he wanted to weave in the extra 3 damage from the weapon, the Fiery War Axe.
Mm-hmm.
So Firebat needs a Blade Flurry again, something to help. Oh, the double this rate will do it, and that's going to be game. Firebat with exactly 0 cards in hand, and no way to get through the taunt. So that was exactly what he needed. That's a really impressive win, just because the odds felt like they were so stacked against him with that starting hand.
Yeah, absolutely. And whenever you see a game end like this, where it's just, no cards in hand and perfect amount of damage, it's just a perfectly built deck. I mean, obviously, it was just built exactly to deal the right amount of damage to win this game. But yeah, that opening hand, we said, didn't look great, but with drawing, the prep and the South Sea deckhand, it
Right.
kind of worked together. And, he does
Yeah.
get a little bit of time against decks like Grim Patron.
Well, he's not going to die by the sword. We're going to see a little bit more of that. I mean, the perfectly built deck. I think all rogue at this stage, we could say, for what it's trying to do, it's perfectly built, right? Like everybody, like the core of all rogue has been refined by some of the top players to the point where there's very few ways to modify it, and the slots that get, modified, the flex spots, they're still debated upon, right? Like
Yeah.
not everybody agrees on those spots.
Yeah, it's just like one or two cards, something like Van Cleef or what your heal is. Sometimes people run, Earthen Ring Farseers and Antique Heal bots, or sometimes only one. So, you see Lothar in some of them. It's just generally what you think you're going to be playing against and what kind of, what you want to do to beat those decks.
All right, so Firebat picked up 2 Wild Growth, and he's got the Harrison Jones already set up. I think he's well on his way to control, I guess, the pace that Lothar wants to dictate. Firebat's gonna be able to take it back as soon as Lothar tries to say what he wants to do with those weapons.
Yeah, I mean, Harrison Jones, great in this matchup. You want to be holding on to it to get a Death Spite more than anything else. You'll see them sometimes pass up. I've seen people play a Fiery War Axe, not swing with it, and then the other player not Harrison Jones it in this matchup, even for 2 cards, because it's so much more important to proc a Death Spite on your terms than theirs. Taking their Whirlwind effect away from them at the right time can often be the difference between life and death in this game, because if you can keep them from Whirlwinding the turn they need to, you might not take enough damage off a Frothing Berserker.
Yeah, I mean, it's the core strategy. The more you can disrupt it, the better off you'll be. Lothar here picked up. I mean, Firebat played the Darkness Aspirant just because it makes sense. But here's a perfect example of what looks like a threat, but really isn't a threat. So we saw that happen with Lothar versus Life Coach, where Lothar ended up using Equality just to get rid of the Darnassus Aspirant. Unfortunately, this is not like the threat that the Aspirant represents. It's kind of minor compared to, if you see it ramp your opponent up to turn, to 7 mana on turn 6, that's dangerous. If it ramps him up to 8 instead of 7, like there's very little difference there for the most part.
Yeah, and this is a good play from Firebat to do that. I love seeing him do this because it puts players in situations to make a mistake here, to interact with an Darnassus. If he uses a removal spell to take care of it, you've got to feel like that is a big win for you because like you said, going into 8 mana, not a big deal. Going into 7 is a very big deal, or possibly 9, and you see Lothar kind of snip that out. He knows what's going on here with that.
All right, Tiny Knight of Evil. This guy's awesome. Unfortunately, it's not very good.
This guy's awesome, but unfortunately, it's not very good.
I mean, he's awesome. Like, just the name,
Yeah.
right? I'm pretty sure around the design table, they were all like, well, we have this guy that we really want, like, we want to include a jouster, right? Like, a knight for warlocks. There's Murloc Knight, you've got all these cool cards. But like, well, how do we make, like, a warlock knight? And they're like, well, it could write a fell hunter. And it could be like, what's the placeholder name? Well, Tiny Knight of Evil. And then the day of release comes out, you're like, oh, crap. I guess we'll go with this.
No, I actually was thinking that. I was like, this card, the placeholder name definitely stuck from day one.
Yeah,
Like,
it didn't move.
Tiny Knight of Evil is just absolutely perfect. And you can see Firebat doesn't mind about giving the extra cards here to Lothar, just wants to make sure that Death Spite doesn't go off when he doesn't want it to.
Yeah. Lothar, unfortunately, for Firebat, is going to be able to clean this up if he wants to. And like the good thing about if Lothar goes for cleanup here, Firebat gets the initiative again. And that's gotta feel pretty good. Oh wow, well that's a weapon.
Yeah. So this changes some things. He could Death Spite here, take down Harrison Jones, set up a good clean sweep of the other 2 minions here on the turn after. Is it worth it taking a mana away from Firebat this turn though? Does he need to deal with the Aspirant here? Like there's so many different ways he could play this turn, and
I think the not dying to combo is a preoccupation of his. Right, so that's one of the few things. Like you're guaranteed to take out the Aspirant, and you want to take out the 5 damage because you're very far away from a lethal with a combo. And if you don't, prevent the extra 5 damage from going face, you're going to just get blown out of the water by just like a random combo turn. It doesn't have to be like a crazy one either.
Yeah, and does he want to use this execute here this turn? Because if he does that, then it's going to be a little harder for him to get through taunts in the future, in the turns where he might be racing Firebat to try to finish the game off.
So we might see a ghoul there just because of that. Yeah, there we go. So he does play the ghoul because that doesn't really count as a removal for taunts, but it still deals with the Harrison Jones.
Yeah, it deals with Harrison Jones, could draw him an extra card off his Acolyte. Love that play here from Lothar.
Yeah, I wouldn't even be surprised to see a Keeper of the Grove on the ghoul just to go face and then play the Shade, but we'll have to see. You've seen one Whirlwind, so there's only so many Whirlwind effects left. I think silencing it off might just be the way to go.
Yeah, it's an aggressive play. You've already seen some of these cards. It takes another Whirlwind effect away from Lothar. Again, every time you can deny them any one of the effects their deck is built around, huge plus for you. He does get
Firebat is debating this. I mean, it's a pretty tough decision to make. I think overall, the Keeper of the Grove is almost a snap call, but there's probably a good reason to maybe trade Harrison and then kill off the Acolyte. But then that slows you down quite a bit.
I think it's the mana issue here. Having 8 versus 9.
Right.
He could have gone, Druid of the Claw and Keeper of the Grove this turn. If he had 9, that's like just a much better, great turn. There's a chance we even might see him just charge and go crazy and try to end the game here as quickly as possible. But, this turn, not bad either. He does leave a mana floating, but he does get to develop a Shade. We've seen a couple Whirlwind effects already, and you're denying another one, so your Shade most likely could live through this turn. That's one thing he's worried about as well, is that if Lothar had 2 Whirlwind effects this turn, it kills a Shade and draws him extra cards, and then he can start trading up. It kills the Harrison Jones. That would be a nightmare this turn.
Yeah, the Lothar's got a pretty good turn of his own as well. His Cruel Taskmaster on the Acolyte trades up very nicely. And Firebat is representing combo. By clearing the ghoul and going for face, you're playing aggressively, so you're trying to put your opponent in a position where he plays defensively, and maybe as a result of that ends up misplaying defensively or committing too many resources to trade. But that's the power of Patron, that they can actually play defensively and still put on pressure because you're afraid.
We talked about this. That's actually like one of the greatest things about playing the Druid deck, and I love that Firebat's doing this. He's giving away misinformation. I mean, he's misrepresenting his hand here against Lothar, because Lothar, if he had to guess what was in Firebat's hand right now, parts of the combo would be at the top of the list because of the way this game is played out. And with him top decking another Frothing Berserker here, I love him developing a Deathbite and trying to get this game over with as quickly as possible.
Oh man, the savage combatant is tempting. But you really look for the combo to kill your opponent right away, right? Like there's almost nothing.
Well, yeah, this is a good turn as well to be able to draw 2 cards because you're not getting super pressured yet. And I don't know if he's going to have a spot later in this game to actually take the time to draw 2 cards here. So I love Firebat taking this opportunity to get the Ancient Allure in play along with the Shade. And if you were to pick up any of the combo pieces, yeah, it makes this game a lot easier to finish off because he just put Lothar to 14. That is signaling to Lothar that he is dead next turn. He needs to play around this. He can't just develop a giant board. People might say, oh, Firebat didn't get enough done that turn. This Deathbite can take care of his 5/5. But Lothar is now very scared that he is dead, just from the cards in Firebat's hand, not to mention the minions that are in play.
Yeah, and if he wants to live, then he has to actually use the shield block right now. Like, he could try to just stall by executing the 5/5 by trading into it and then getting a crazy frothing turn next turn. And this might be the play that wins, right? If you're up against combo and you think he's only got one part of it, the play to win is definitely to enable this crazy Warsong frothing turn. This is probably it.
I think that's lethal, right?
I think that's it. He's got 8 plus...
Yeah, 6, 12, 14. Yeah, that's 14. It's 14 without your hero power, right? It's 15 with the hero power. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, and the thing is, Lothar's turn last turn, he's playing to win. He's not playing not to lose.
Right.
It's the only way that he can win the game is if he starts to make some headway. If he keeps playing defensively, eventually Firebat's going to win the game anyway. He's never just going to, backdoor his way into the combo here. He has to make some kind of proactive play.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm pretty sure we could look at this game again and take a different line of play on the turn where he Emperored, and I'm pretty sure I could have been able to defend it, right? If you choose to shield block, you could have probably made a good argument for it. It just becomes really difficult when you're faced with, you don't have an Armor Smith. You can't just get a crazy Whirlwind effect just giving you, say, 7, 8, 9 armor as a result of one turn. So shield block being the only armor gaining play you've got makes it, a little bit worse. And there's a potential reverse sweep for Firebat here. Wins with the Rogue, wins with the Druid, and if he beats the Patron mirror match, well, I guess Patron's gonna win this one either way.
Yeah.
There's nothing to say. Oh, who's playing what? Who's who?
I'm guessing Firebat's at the top. Is it going to be the easiest way to do that? But yeah, I mean, this is going to be the second match in a row where the player who went down 0-2 has got a chance to win game 5 to have the reverse sweep. And as we said, that's one of the worst ways to lose in a best of 5 in Hearthstone.
Yeah, Firebat is on the coin, and he's got the Emperor Thorsten, so he's able to capitalize on the Acolyte of Pain early. He's forcing Lothar to have a Fiery War Axe, which Lothar doesn't have, which means now he's going to be able to double dip in the Acolyte of Pain value, where he's going to be every whirlwind represents 2 card draws, and with an Emperor in hand, you're more than happy with that.
Yeah, if he can get even just, I mean, you might even see him use Inner Rage. It's possible just to get some extra cards for this Emperor. But if he ever finds a Whirlwind, I don't think there's any way he doesn't snap play that card to get extra cards in his hand, because you just want to have as full and as good of a hand as possible when you get that first Emperor trigger, because you generally only get 1 in these matchups. If you get 2, that's like the dream.
All right, so here's the big problem, and I don't know if it's a really big problem, but typically, whoever gets the first patron board in the mirror match ends up winning.
Right.
Lothar is likely to get his first patron out before Firebat does. So Firebat has got to be looking for another whirlwind effect to use with his own patron, possibly. And this is it. This is usually the swing turn. He has the Inner Rage, he's got the patron, he's got the Death's Bite, and Firebat is going to have to play from behind from here on out, trying to just clear everything, but it's going to be super difficult.
Yeah, that Inner Rage, what a good top deck for him here, too, as well. Getting to make infinite more, Grim Patrons this turn. And as you said, it's so hard to recover from these spots. The first person who makes them usually wins. There's not a lot of ways to control this board.
All right, so we'll see if Firebat... I mean, Fiery War Axe isn't a bad play because you can kill one of them, and then you can maybe Inner Rage the 5-1 if you want to. You could also just tank that 5, but it always sucks a little bit. It's a lot of damage taken.
Yeah, he's gonna make the play you're talking about here, Inner Raging. Gonna use his Fiery War Axe to start taking down other ones.
Takes down the damaged one. I wonder what the reasoning is. Battle Rage definitely has to be the consideration.
Yeah, you'll see these players, especially in the mirror, make some very strange plays to help play around Battle Rage, like not attacking face with weapons with Fiery War Axe early until they get 4 armor, because you don't want to give them the extra card, because that extra little damage might not matter because you can OTK people, or you can 15 to 17 people in a turn with Grim Patron. So how much does 1 life matter here? I mean, I've even seen people not armor up on turn 2 in these matches just to make Battle Rage that much better. I actually don't like that play very much, but I see what they're doing and why they do it.
Yeah. Alright, so Firebat, again, in a position of discomfort. I guess Emperor could come out to force a response from Lothar immediately, but then again, Lothar has the perfect answer to that, which is smash the ghoul, execute, and move on with your life. So Firebat can't quite afford playing Emperor for the most part. There's no Warsong Commander yet, there's no Frothing. There's a chance that Firebat aims to stall the game to the point where he's eventually able to just get a crazy Frothing compensation play, where you reverse kill your opponent. He gets patrons, well, fine, you just get a Frothing.
Yeah, he's got a chance here where he can get a Warsong Commander and a Grim Patron of his own going, and then trigger Lothar's Unstable Ghoul and maybe be able to clean up from there, but is he going to have a high enough life total for it? Lothar's going to be putting the pressure on here. He's going to be able to slam his own minion to draw a card and spawn another Grim Patron here. He's still sitting behind this ghoul to help protect, his patrons and make more of them. This is a hard spot for Firebat to be in.
I mean, the moment he picks up a Frothing Berserker, if he top decks Frothing here, I assume we're seeing Emperor Thorsten.
Well, 3, 6...
If he picks up a Frothing off the top, we see Emperor, and then turn 8 will be pretty amazing for Firebat. That's not the Frothing, but you still got an Emperor, because you need to play your patrons with your Warsong and just reverse fill up that board.
Yeah, he's just got to hope this is going to be good enough here, and Lothar's going to be able to push for a ton of damage again this turn, but he can't lethal him from this spot.
You might trade away your 3-1 patron and then execute the Emperor.
Yeah, I mean, the 3-1 patron doesn't have a ton of value. It can't spawn another one and it dies to your Unstable Ghoul. So getting any value out of it, like trading it for, Emperor Thorson just to get some damage on it's pretty good, because you don't really want to give up your Unstable Ghoul if you don't have to. It's got such high value sitting on your board, protecting your patrons, because Firebat can't attack them with his Fiery War Axe without generating, a bunch more.
So Lothar is still, I think the edge. If like Firebat could still win this because he's got the crazy card that Lothar is missing, which is the Warsong Commander. It's such an important card if you're looking to get a crazy reverse kill. You know, sometimes you can consolidate the early game or the mid game with a patron in a rage with Death's Bite like Lothar did. But if the patron opponent is not dead or dying, you're very scared. You're playing scared
Yep.
from the reverse frothing play.
Yeah, and exactly. Like Lothar has to be careful and manage his board at just the right amount of pressure, but not too much, because he could die to the OTK of a Frothing Berserker draw from Firebat. So he doesn't want to make his board, full of patrons, because then Firebat can use that against him and get one of those one-turn kills with a gigantic Frothing Berserker.
So now Firebat can actually use the Armor Smith to stabilize his health total, I think, right? He can play one Patron, one Armor Smith, one Ghoul, and that's going to give him a tremendous amount of health back to where he might be able to stabilize and push back in. But again, the moment Lothar picks up his own Warsong Commander, this Frothing Berserker with a single Whirlwind effect could switch the game back in Lothar's favor. It's a pretty intense back and forth
Yeah, the
just because
mirror
of the way it works.
Yeah, the mirror match in Grim Patron is always a fun one to cast, because it's hard enough to play one side of the deck correctly, but when you start putting in both players' hands and what they can play, what they will play, what they play around, it's so unbelievably hard. There's so much math and so many difficult things going on here.
Yeah, and it seems like roping is a very common thing in that matchup. If you've seen, Tiddler Celestial, for instance, play this, the rope is real. All right, so it turns out Firebash is going to make face trades. He's, not really worried about frauding OTK. He's got 4 minions on board, so he's not enabling his opponent to do it. And anytime minions take damage, Lothar is feeding his opponent armor. Yeah, I think you might try to kill. If you go face here, what happens, right? Like
You
Death's
go
Bite
face,
face. You
he goes
can't
to 10.
charge. You can't charge. You have to kill the Armor Smith or the Warsong. You gotta pick your
Well,
poison.
yeah, there's a chance that if you pick up Warsong Commander, you can go off next turn
Mm.
with a Frothing Berserker, depending on how big Firebat's board is. But you're also worried about Warsong Commander sitting there and a big turn from Firebat as well. If he has something crazy like Frothing Berserker double Whirlwind here, you might actually just die. But this way he can't spawn
Oh man,
any more Grim Patrons.
Firebat with the crazy play. Harrison Jones to get that Whirlwind, steal it for himself, and spawn. I mean, this is just an insane turn for Firebat.
Yeah, he could even play his other Grim Patron if he wants to this turn to get more. But I think he's digging for, what do you think he's digging for here?
Frothing.
Yeah, he's digging for Frothing and trying to end it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd imagine you dig for Frothing. I mean, if you deny the Death's Bite here, you're happy. Um, he doesn't have enough mana to play the Harrison Jones on the back of this. Is he? I mean, I guess that's fine if you play double Ghoul, but that's really wonky. I have to question that Battle Rage. I feel like on 10 mana, it would have been fine.
We'll say he's going to Harrison Jones here now after attacking
Okay.
with the Patron, yeah.
Gotcha. Alright, so just gonna keep the second patron for,
Picks up some extra life points here, gets the shield block as well.
oh man.
Kind of trying to keep himself out of range of, one turn kills from Lothar. And with the double Frothing Berserker picked up, you got to believe he's going to be able to end this game next turn. He's got a Whirlwind, double Frothing Berserker, and a Cruel Taskmaster. I mean, Firebat has all the tools he needs to end this game here. And we're seeing what can often happen here in these games. As you said, often the first person to make patrons wins. It's so hard to
I'd
answer.
say like if it happens, it's like 80% win rate as soon as you hit turn 5 with Inner Rage Death's Bite.
Yeah. But if the other person ever gets through it and is left with a board afterwards, their win rate just skyrockets.
Right.
Again, these decks do not recover from those board states, amazingly.
Yeah, at least they have a weakness, right? Each other.
Yeah.
They can abuse each other's board states. That's great. So Firebat has played this very well. I have to be honest with you, like his plays were top notch. Emperor really helped out, smooth everything out. I thought Lothar would get away with the win just because of the Inner Rage Death Bite, but the Warsong Commander he needed was never found to make that Frothing a near guaranteed lethal. After that point, he could have gotten it at any stage, but it's looking just more and more unlikely that he gets away with it.
Yeah, all he needed was the Warsong Commander, as you said, and this game would have been way in his favor. Now, I don't know if he even has a chance to win this game anymore. I mean, he's probably doing math here about, should I even play a minion? Because if I do I give Firebat enough fuel to win this game? Because Emperor Thorson is triggered. He's still got multiple cards in his hand from that trigger, and he's gained 4 more cards over the last turn, plus his draw step. Like, there's almost no way. Like, Lothar is not going to be surprised when he dies this turn.
All right, well, Firebat can just take the win here, right? Like, just go Warsong Commander into double frothing with a ghoul. Can you suicide it anywhere? I don't believe you can. You'd have to go for a patron with it to actually spawn patrons to then get an AoE damage.
Yeah, does
So
he
you
have
have
enough
to make a
room for
patron
all that?
first.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he does. Like overall, he does. Like you play a patron, then you trade them away, and then you can always play your frothing on top.
What now?
Yeah, he's gonna
He
make
he probably
sure.
is worried about a reverse kill as well, right? Like the
Yeah,
counter reverse kill.
yeah. That's the counter kill. Yeah, I was gonna say he's just making sure that he's actually just going through all the motions of counting everything right now. I mean, and he's got to make sure he does it in enough time. Again, these animations do take a little while, but you can queue this one up pretty easily.
All right. Yeah. The good thing is there are no patrons needing to be replicate here, which makes the process a lot easier. The good thing for Firebat as well is that he's going to get himself a crazy amount of armor in the process.
Yeah,
That's another really big deal.
Yeah, this is going to be more than enough because he's going to be able to deal 2 damage to the unstable goal and then use this whirlwind to take care of the last piece of health off of it. These frothing berserkers are actually going to be gigantic.
Yeah, and it doesn't really matter. Like, I think this is actually a much safer play, just because you're not relying on patrons duplicating 25 times before you get the lethal. And in fact, maybe there was not going to be enough room. And by using frothings, once you've given them the charge, if your war song dies, it doesn't matter. So when the whirlwind effects trigger, your frothings are still very healthy and going in for the kill. Firebat with a crazy reverse sweep on Lothar, who went 2-0 and then ended up getting frothinged, I guess.
And look at the last card on top of the next card coming up for Lothar was there is the Warsong Commander he desperately needed the entire game to easily just finish this one off.
Yep, so the game is going to go to Firebat. Surprise, surprise, ladies and gentlemen. It turns out Firebat's a pretty good player, right? How
Yeah.
good is Firebat? Pretty good.
I've heard a thing or two about him being pretty good. Some people say maybe the best. I don't know. I don't know if he's had enough finishes in first place to really say that.
Yeah, I mean, he's just he's still learning. We're going to
Yeah.
give him some time.
He is still very
So,
young.
I'm curious to know how the next games are going to pan out. We have 3 more matches today. We're going to have the winners match, which is going to pit Kucha versus Firebat. So that's going to give Kucha the opportunity to sweep one of the better players out there. His team Hellraisers doesn't have an amazing amount of exposure, at least here in the West, as far as I know. And we'll have Lothar versus Askaka playing the winners match, and whoever wins this will then have to face off against the loser of the winners match, which is going to be either Firebat or Kucha. So no one is completely out of it yet. They still have a chance to come back. The first person to be eliminated will come as soon as we go to the losers bracket first match, which will be after the next one. So we'll take a short break, guys. We'll be right back. Do not go.